Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Return to Work, Space Considerations, and How Design is Impacting Deals. Now, before we hand it off to our awesome presenters, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items, one of which is we are recording today, and the recording will be available within 48 hours, along with today's slides. We also definitely encourage you to ask questions, and you have two ways of doing that, using the chat function or the Q&A function, and our presenters are going to be answering those questions as time allows today. Now with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to David.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm David Erard. I'm a tax partner here with Armanino. I'm one of the leaders of our real estate industry and real estate industry niche group. I'm really excited about today's panel. I think you're going to find that Ted Heisler and Randy Parker, who are joining me, both have some fantastic insights. Got a lot of questions these days about how real estate is changing and different things. We've obviously had 2020 as a very interesting year. And to get started, let me ask Ted, could you please give an introduction of yourself and your background, and Randy afterward?
Sure. Thanks, David. Well, I'm Ted Heisler, Vice President of Interior Architecture and Design at Ware Malcolm. I've been in this business a really long time. Randy and I were joking the other day. I think we stopped keeping track, but let's just say over 25 years. I lead our practice nationally, so I get to work with a lot of different clients and our internally talented team, over 23 offices across the U.S. We are a full-service architectural firm and love to talk about interiors, so ready for you.
Perfect, thanks.
Sure.
And my name is Randy Parker, and I'm a Senior Vice President with Savills US. We represent tenants and users and occupiers of office space in matters of real estate. So don't do any landlord work. So my eyes are from the tenant's perspective, and I exist really for one reason, which is to, at the end of the day, make sure that a real estate transaction has been negotiated with my tenant's business plan in mind, and the best that I can, I try to outmaneuver landlords. I have been doing this for over 25 years as well. I've worked in every major market in the United States. I'm headquartered out of Orange County, and I do most of my work in California, but I do a fair bit of national work. In particular, I work in the professional service arena, and so accounting firms and law firms are kind of my deal, well over 75 plus firms to date, and very excited to be here. So thank you, David and Ted. It's great to see you.
Perfect. And so if just to shorthand that, Ted, I think you get to design and help us make really cool interior spaces, and Randy, you get to represent the tenants that might use those things.
I yell at landlords. That's really what I do for my living. That's what I do for my time in this world.
So I think we've got a polling question we'd like to throw out to the group to get us started here. So we've obviously had, as everybody knows, 2020 has been a very interesting year. People are having to adapt, and just curious from the audience if you could each respond. We'd love to know where on the spectrum you feel like your company fits as far as preparedness for what we're dealing with COVID. So we'll give everybody maybe about 30 seconds to answer that question. I see some responses coming in. And certainly it's something we're interested in hearing, how well prepared everybody felt like they were. So just a little bit of background on me. I've been actually working partly remotely for about 6 years now. So I have the benefit, I think, of having gone through the brain damage of how to work remotely with a team that's partially in one office or in different geographies. I'd say I'm geographically agnostic about the clients I work with, really just looking for things that would be good fits for them as well as me. And from my standpoint, Armanino has also been I think the technology that we use here has been very good. The firm grew up near Silicon Valley, so we've got a little bit of an advantage of maybe having tech companies as our neighbors and clients. And I think for real estate generally in different lines of business, there's probably a whole spectrum of preparedness. Real estate is sometimes quick to adapt to certain things and sometimes not. So we've got a few answers in. Interesting. So Randy, I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next one and maybe ask you to give everybody a kind of an overview of what 2020 has looked like for you.
Well, it started out really well until March, and then the world changed, and bizarrely enough, right, for all of us, it literally, it seems to me it changed overnight. And we went from, arguably one of the best, if not the best economy that the U.S. has ever seen to what we would understand later as, a very, very, very significant economic downturn. So right now, and I took a moment to yesterday to call some of my partner offices. We have offices throughout the United States in every major market. And so I picked on a few major markets. So I called my partners in New York, just asking them about volume of deals, et cetera. And San Francisco and Los Angeles and Chicago. And I can tell you about Orange County, and it is a constant theme, which is that there is very little going on. And I mean by going on, meaning tenant volume. So companies out in the marketplace seeking office space, actively talking to the landlords. And so I'm going to say very, very little. The only group that seems to have some confidence in committing long-term are very large corporations, and in particular, I'm going to say technology, healthcare, and to a lesser extent, but still somewhat active, is the mortgage industry. So there isn't a market. There is not a market in the United States presently that is doing anything material. Tenant volume is very low, and we just had another major setback, both in California and in Oregon and Washington and New York and elsewhere, where it feels almost like we're back in March again. So I think 2020 will be a bust. I think that it will be, many millions of feet nationally of negative absorption. And negative absorption and positive absorption is a company that's 10,000 feet going to 15. So it's +5. Negative absorption could be in the millions of feet. And there are now discussions that when this whole thing shakes out going forward in 2021 and 2022, that the impact to all of this could be greater than even the Great Recession. So not good. It's very troubling time. And the problem obviously is, CEOs, managing partners, real estate decision makers just have no confidence in the economy, and really even more importantly, have no visibility, because a lease or a purchase of real estate is that, it's confidence, that firms have visibility and are willing to commit. And we just simply don't have that.
That's interesting. And you used a phrase when we were speaking in advance of this panel, a tale of two victims.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so what I was talking about there, yeah, thank you, David. And rightfully so, tenants believe strongly that there is blood in the water. And the few tenants that are out there that can commit and want to commit, are looking, for, very large concession packages and rent reductions, et cetera. Conversely, you have the landlord community, and this is all throughout the United States. You've got the landlord community that is, fighting like crazy to hold rents and try to at least maintain some level of, where we were before this all hit. And because you have those two dynamics, you've got a staring match, and nobody's and compound that with the other group, which is a much bigger group that they just simply are unwilling to commit. You have very little tenant volume. You have landlords and tenants unwilling to make deals. And what the result of all of that is 1-year extensions. So that's what we're seeing. The volume of business for tenants that have to make a real estate decision because their leases are expiring, I would say, my own personal experience, at least 7 to 8 out of 10 have just elected to punt and do a 1-year extension.
Yeah, I think you had also referred to 2020 as the year of the 1-year extension. Just kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
seems like that's what a lot of what the volume that you've been dealing with is, maybe just having the 1-year kind of let's try to punt and figure out what happens next.
Well, yeah, and I think that and rightly so, and I think that is a smart way to go for tenants. If you have little confidence and don't know where this is all going yet, and here we are back in March, right in the middle of November, we've now, I think, retraced close back to March. I mean, why in the world would you commit to a 5, 7, or 10-year lease? You just simply wouldn't. I mean, it's very rational. I understand it, and it absolutely makes sense. But it's that's a tough slog when you've worked for a year or 2 years on a real estate transaction, you got it all teed up, ready to go. COVID hits. It was a 10-year deal, and then they just elect to do a 1-year deal. And it's funny, many of the 1-year deals that I did execute in March, I'm actually talking again about doing another 1-year deal. So, right, because 6 months has gone by. So
we were hoping, Randy, that you'd talk those people into at least a 5-year deal, so they'd spend some money. I mean,
that's the trickle down. I mean, the net of that is nothing really happens, right? It doesn't. A 1-year extension, as is, requires 0 services from architects and GCs, and so there is. It's a wide swath of negative circumstances when this kind of activity happens. And if it happens again for another year, then we've lost 2 years. This is really, we probably likely have lost 2 years in the commercial real estate business as it relates to not only, occupancy, but all the other services, architectural and all the subcontractors under the GC. So very, very challenging, very concerning.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting year for everybody. And Ted, kind of move in your direction. What are you seeing on the design and architecture front this year?
So, mirroring really what Randy's saying, I guess Randy's usually first in the boat, and we're following. So he has more clarity, if you can call it that, about what's happening on some fronts. But I will say, I guess good news for our team, because we're a full service architectural team. Of course, I lead our interiors practice, and our primary focus is workplace. So that's truly been in the doldrums, because a lot of the same kind of thing. If you're a larger tenant in the market, particularly a Fortune 50 company, we're still seeing people move ahead with their plans, but buying, day in and day out, people like Randy and I always like to brag about all the big deals, but the reality is, in most markets, they're the small to mid-sized deals that drive the day-to-day business. So it's the 3, 5, 10, 15,000 square footers, and all of them are doing the 1-year punt. And so some of them we were able to help them with, how to get back to the office and workplace strategy, et cetera, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. But the bright side for our business has been on the e-commerce side, on the industrial side. There's a voracious appetite for anything e-commerce. And I think it just, is mirroring consumer behavior. I mean, how many packages did we all get from Amazon in 2019 versus 2020? It's a huge sector that's on fire right now. So we've been fortunate to get some business out of that sector, and that's really helped us. As far as the business itself, I mean, I think we find ourselves, we can't seem to figure out how to just do tenants only. So we work for tenants and landlords. So we walk the fence on that between the two. And for landlords, it's really, we've been doing a lot with building upgrades, making everything touchless. How do you make a building more healthy? So a lot of our team have been engaged in things like that. On the tenant side, it's really more of a push to mobility and how do we get people functional with this new ecosystem of the home office plus the workplace, where we don't see that going away. We still see people have a great need for that.
Yeah, and just quickly, how have you had to pivot this year, and has it been focused mainly on, upgrades or, adaptation of buildings for health and spacing, things like that? How has 2020 been a little bit different, and what have you seen that you've had to adjust to?
Well, I'd say, definitely more adjusting to doing more workplace strategy, because one thing's for sure, everybody's confused about what to do. And so they're saying, Ted, I don't even know how much space I need, because now half my people are working from home. And so helping them with workplace strategy is important. Those people who have gone back to the office, and I know, we've kind of, especially in Orange County, have kind of gone reverse, more shut down because of increased cases, but trying to help people and clients with how to safely occupy their spaces. So a lot of it people haven't been spending a lot of money to do it. It's been more so, how do you spread people out so they can safely move about the space? Best, protocols. We have a branding team. They've been busy with, nice looking signage about, making sure that you're spraying down your workstation after you leave the office, or those kinds of protocols. So a lot of different services than we have been practicing in 2019 in pivoting there.
Great. Yeah, and it's I guess, Marie, let's move on to the what we call the new normal, if we even know what that is. But we got another polling question, I think, to throw up for the group. Perfect, thank you. So just wanted to get a sense from the group about how disruptive COVID has been for you to seeing with your clients and people that you're doing business with. It's interesting. We'll give a little bit longer for people to respond, but look, majority of the responses are coming in with some disruption or major disruption. And nobody yet has said no major disruption. So it's not a surprise. 2020 has certainly been very disruptive in a lot of ways. So let me just share this real quick.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah, 2020 has been a very interesting year. And Randy, can you give just kind of what is we've talked about kind of 2020 generally, but maybe some sense of what is the new normal and what's going on that you think is going to be a permanent change? Just give us a sense of what you're seeing as kind of a new normal, if that is even definable yet.
Yeah, I'm glad you finished the question with those few last words. And I usually have answers for a lot of these things. My honest answer is right now, I don't know, which is even more terrifying than anything else from the point of view of, and we talked about it earlier, I think that, and I called it kind of the fog of war. I'm going backwards on our outline here, but, early on with this, everybody retrenched, went home, and we figured out how to, operate under this new environment. And I think there was actually some novelty to it, and that probably took us, March, April, and maybe into May. But I'm really now sensing from polling my clients and talking to a lot of individuals that most folks are pretty darn tired of this. That the novelty is worn off, and that Zoom meetings are they're obviously very necessary, but there's nothing like shaking a hand or high-fiving or watching body language when you have a presentation or a conversation, and that's just simply not happening right now. And I also think people need people, and so this notion that this is office space is irrelevant, I'm not buying. I think there'll be some hybrid model. Ted touched on the fact that office buildings are changing, so there's going to be a lot of touchless kinds of scenarios, and I do believe that will be something that goes on forever. Because there's other reasons that maybe you want to do that, not just COVID. I think that, as we look at office space, and Ted, jump in here, but it depends on your industry. But the days of, for the last 5 years, both in the accounting industry, professional service, but most industries across the board, I was challenged with the word efficiency, which is code for we're going to take less space and basically just compress our footprint in with the idea that that is, you know, one way that this firm can save money. So it was driven entirely by expense and you know, shoulder to shoulder, smaller workstations, workstations that were lower in height. They, you know, all of those kinds of things were kind of the norm. I'm going to say now that going forward, private office and really a strong argument over the last 10 years that private offices were not necessary. I'm telling you right now, private offices are necessary. And I think that people want private offices to go in and close their door, create their own bubble. And really, I think it helps them to feel safe. So if I had to guess, guys, I think that efficiency is out, which bizarrely enough, it may require some firms to take even more space because workstations are going to get large again. I think that companies are going to embrace private offices, including interior offices, maybe smaller interior offices, et cetera. And, you know, but all of that said, I really do believe that there is a real reason to have office space going forward. And this is not the end of office space. People, I think, are really clamoring to get back and have a place to go.
Absolutely. And I'd echo that. And I think I you know, always kind of climb out of my skin a little bit when I've been reading a lot of articles and we've been doing a lot of research about the office over the course of this period. So we can help, you know, help shepherd our clients forward. And some of the nonsense of we don't need an office anymore. I've read a few of those articles, and actually there's certainly some case studies. But I think we just have to look back. I have to look back at, and this was probably almost 10 years ago when Yahoo, Marissa Mayer at Yahoo called all the people back to the office because Yahoo had made that declaration, hey, everybody's going to work from home. We're not going to go to the office. And she could see as she came to take over Yahoo, a deteriorating culture. And I think that's what's such a misstep for some of these companies that have said, hey, we don't need a corporate campus anymore. I think, you know, they're going to watch the erosion of their culture and their employees in general is going to go away. So, have to say that as job one. And then, you know, as far as the taking of office space, I truly think that it's going to be the same or slightly more. I mean, there's definitely going to be companies that are going to be looking at compressing their footprint as much as they can just to save money. But somebody once reminded me, you know, people cost 10 times more than space. And so if you don't get the people part right, you're going to have problems in just being able to be productive and get that collaboration and the, you know, really the magic that happens when we're all together in an office. So definitely echo, you know, office sizes, definitely more in the common area amenity spaces. We're definitely seeing clients talk a lot more about, hey, you know, the biggest thing we miss in our organization is not having people come together. So in this new space, we want to have better amenity space. So more teaming spaces, more collaborative spaces, more conference rooms, definitely more offices. On the small side, again, I think is just having that containment for future. We've all become germaphobes, right? So we need a little bit more space. And, you know, the good news about the private office has always been acoustics. It's really tough to have an open office environment without those acoustics being part of the equation.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess, Randy, are there things that you think are going to be permanent changes that you can already identify? Or maybe is there things that you could segregate into being like a temporary change that you think will go back to the way it was? Or are we too early to tell? Let me just turn that over to you and see how would you handicap some of this stuff?
Yeah, I really do think I concur with everything that Ted has said. Is that it is not the end of the office space, and you know, talking about 10 years ago, Harvard Business Review came out and said open space is fantastic, and then articles started to come out almost right a couple of years prior to COVID, so 2018ish. On the failure of all of it, and that actually these open office spaces are not very productive. and it causes a lot of issues. So I'm going to say that folks are going to look at real estate, and this is, this is just my personal thought going through this, because we've gone dramatically from one end to another. I think real estate is going to be even more important to firms, and it's going to be more important from the point of view that it's going to be a differentiator. And as you start to think about how important your office space is to your employee, which is really a big part of what Ted's mandate always is, how is it designed? But even more importantly, that, or equally important, there was a shift for companies to try to find the least costly alternative, buildings that maybe are older. Think about in older markets, let's pick on New York for a moment, the post and pre-World War II buildings. Everybody was moving to them because they thought they were cool and interesting. Smaller floor plates, exposed walls, little teeny tiny elevators. And most importantly, and I think that this is really going to be a big driver, the building systems are still antiquated. And I think there will be a shift to new buildings, newer buildings, a big discussion on, tell us, Mr. Landlord, Mrs. Landlord, how is your building systems set up to support, and it's called wellness, the exchange of air. How many times does the air exchange, i.e. meaning fresher air? In new buildings, it's state of the art. It happens very frequently. In older buildings, guys, it doesn't, and it's less healthy air. And I don't think people really cared as much about that, but certainly now with COVID, they will. So interestingly enough, I'm betting that there's going to be a movement away from B and C buildings into Class A buildings. You might take less space, but people and firms are going to seek buildings that allow them to say to their employees, this is the safest building possible. So keep an eye on that as a dynamic. I think there's also going to be an exodus from the central business districts. We're already seeing it to a great degree. Think about New York and San Francisco, just on the residential side. I'm not saying that companies may keep a smaller headquarters in New York, but they are moving to the suburbs and putting all of their other operating units out there. And I think they're going to start. It's going to be kind of the hub and spoke kind of model. And I think that will result in many markets, the suburban markets are going to flourish much more quickly than central business districts. And then the final thought is, going forward on a lease, I can only imagine that companies are going to want to build in flexibility because they now have learned that, if they're not using their office, they need mechanisms to get out of it. And so by way of example, you might do a 10-year deal with rights to cancel, the third and the sixth years, that kind of thing. So that if in fact something does happen and they need to get out of their leasehold obligations, they have mechanisms in place to do that.
Interesting. And I know none of us are on here are psychologists or HR folks, but are either of you having any discussions or things coming up with your clients about how they're trying to balance, say, a remote workforce or less real estate with maintaining their company's culture? Is that something that you're actively addressing with people?
Yeah, we are, and not from a psychological standpoint either, but just from a workplace strategy standpoint. I think we have a variety of methodologies of working with clients to try to help build consensus around what's the right solution for them, because there's definitely, mobility. There's one thing that got a giant push forward was mobility in the workplace, and by that, I mean being able to work in an ecosystem of spaces. We saw that emerging really over the last 10 years, especially with European companies, a little less so with US companies. But now that we've all learned we can work remotely, that's been a huge push forward, and trying to figure out the right balance to the ecosystem is a big part of what we're working on right now.
Yeah, and it may be too early to tell, but do you think that what I'm kind of expecting is there's probably going to be more of a balance in the future between working remotely and working in the office? So just my own opinion is I don't think the office is going to go away. I think it's going to be, there's a lot of things that are really important to companies about having a good space, having somewhere for people to get together. For myself, working remotely, I'd say it wouldn't have been nearly the same rich experience if I hadn't been able to get together with people in the office. So I think I would see that. I think I see probably more of a hybrid coming out of this than maybe a full or a full move to a remote workforce. Is that consistent with what you
uh,
both are hearing on the street?
Absolutely. And I think, there's I've been involved with Cornet Global for a long time. It's an organization that focuses on corporate real estate and corporate real estate executives and those that work with them. And they did a global study and this was back in July, just about how people are working. And universally around the globe, people want to work from home 2 to 3 days a week. They want to be in the office those other remaining days of the week. So having that balance is something that people in the corporate world are really embracing. And I don't see that going backwards even after we get out of this. I think there's some things about working from home for specific tasks that have worked really well for people, but not full time. There's just too much missing.
Yeah. Hey, Ted, under that scenario, and I guess we're talking about hoteling. Would a firm under that scenario where 2 days at home, 3 days in the office, 4 days in the office, would that require them to take the same amount of space in your mind, or does that, because you got to put them somewhere when they're in the office? What do you think that'll look like going forward? Because I agree with you. I think that's going to be the hybrid model.
Yeah, we see clients doing both things, Randy. I think we see some clients saying, hey, we want to compress this down. And one of our corporate clients, European clients, they have a free address policy. And by that, essentially, they're saving space because they're only using the desks. So they overpopulate. They have fewer desks than employees. So they look at their space and they measure it by how many, rather than person per square foot, it's per person served in the organization. So they can have a 1.2, 1.3 ratio of desks per employee. So they can compress more so that way. But the bulk of the companies that we're working with right now are not doing a free address. They will do this hybrid, but they'll keep your desk because they don't know exactly how it's going to play out.
Yeah,
when you're
that's what I'm
be in
seeing.
there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm seeing, Ted. Very few companies are committing to 100% hoteling and just sign in and you never know where you're going to sit. That's pretty aggressive. It may catch on, but I'm not seeing that as much.
Yeah, I think it's more, if you're, it depends on what you do too, right? Especially in the professional services lane, I don't see people compressing. I really don't.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting too, because when in a hoteling arrangement or when you have, say the same desk or the same office, I guess I could see there's certainly being some issues with people being concerned about who was in here yesterday and what's the cleaning protocol. So are you seeing or hearing that people are trying to have dedicated space for hotelers? So maybe if you have, in an example, 3 people, you'd want 3 separate spaces for them, or would it be 3 people sharing 2 spaces, or are those thoughts?
Well, the hoteling,
what are you hearing?
The hoteling side still is the notion of the hoteling piece is you would do what they call a clean desk policy. No family pictures on your desk. It's just you're sharing that desk, so it has to be wiped down every day. You put your things in a locker, and that sort of thing. So no sharing really happens with that on the hoteling side. I mean, you are, excuse me, on the hoteling side, you are sharing desks. Yeah. If I'm not sounding contradictory, but so we see clients on both sides, but so much depends, and there's never a one size fits all. So I think that's always maybe one of the biggest takeaways I'd hope to leave with everybody is, you have to look specifically at the kind of company it is, the kind of functions within the company, because we've had a lot of hybrids. We've had a few clients that we're working with. They have a hybrid solution for the bulk of their space, but they have a few people, they may have a sales organization within their office, and those people are out, 4 to 5 days a week. They're out calling on clients, or they're working from home office, and in pre-pandemic, we're on the road, traveling someplace. They don't need a dedicated desk, but the rest of the office sure does. So I think it's important to embrace, a strategic plan of how you're going to occupy space, rather than the, whole we're all remote or we're all in. Those hybrid things are going to be a bigger notion going forward, I think.
Yeah, and Ted, remember back when this all started, almost immediately, but certainly a month into it, so many articles that it was the death of office space. It's never going to be needed again. And, David, we kind of talked about, I call it kind of the fog of war, which was, you're in the middle of this and we're never coming back, right? It is just, and it works. And again, it was novel and we can do this. But I think now we're switching to the hybrid model, and be interesting to see. I'm betting that in this hybrid model, you might keep your headquarters in a major city, but you're going to have the majority of your staff in the suburbs. And the net of all of that is that you're taking about the same amount of real estate.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting to look at some of these studies that we've been engaged with and looked at, just what's happened through this pandemic too, because I think it's odd to call it a honeymoon, but we did get through kind of a honeymoon stage. Hey, we can do this. It's kind of, to what Randy said before, this is kind of cool. I can work from home. I didn't realize I could, and then everybody got to the burnout stage of, can I meet with my people again? Can I shake hands? Can I have a talk around the coffee machine about, did my sports team, win or lose this weekend? So I think all those things are evidence that people are ready to get back. And it's just a matter of, we haven't talked a lot about the vaccines, but I think, really great news to see almost a race now with Moderna and Pfizer, with some of these vaccine announcements that have been coming out. I think we're all hopeful that'll help push everything forward.
Great. And so we've talked a lot about what's happened in 2020, and I guess if I mentioned a honeymoon, I think 2020, if I was married to the year 2020, I'd be ready for a divorce. So
absolutely.
So could we, Marie, could you skip ahead to the next polling question? Because we're going to start getting into what we think, a little bit of an idea of what we might see looking forward. And I'll ask you guys to pull out the crystal balls here in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But would like to know from each of the attendees, so how are you feeling about 2021? So somewhere between very optimistic and very pessimistic. We give you 4 choices, and interested to see how everybody's feeling.
I like the very optimistic 15. That's pretty good.
Got a few people very optimistic, and
it's tanking now. Oh no.
Interestingly, nobody seems to be very pessimistic. So that would probably tell me we don't have a lot of folks working in the hospitality industry, or the few others that have been really struggling. Okay, great. Let me go ahead and end this one. And let's talk about, so now let's pull out the crystal ball. And Marie, if you could skip forward a slide. Randy, I throw this one to you, and we've talked about this a little bit, but maybe tell us how you see office space being a major differentiator or not for companies as we kind of pull out of 2020.
Yeah, and maybe what is also kind of important, and it's a theme here, but I think it's an important one. Um, that I think some markets actually, in 2021 and 2022 are actually going to do very nicely, and you might even call it a robust market. Ted touched on it earlier, but it's worthy of mentioning again with strength. The industrial market is just still on fire. So if you have clients or you personally own industrial real estate, congratulations, because it doesn't look anything like the pandemic of 2020. It's just amazing how well it's performed. As we look at office space and of course, hospitality and retail, we know what that's on the other side, far, far, far away. I think that some markets are going to do better than others. And when I think about who is in trouble and what markets are in trouble, I'm very concerned about major cities, central business districts. And so first and foremost would be New York City. And I also think, San Francisco falls in that category, and Chicago and Philadelphia, Detroit, and to a degree, Los Angeles, downtown LA. And what's the common theme in all of that? Well, very densely populated areas. Most, if not all, are reliant on mass transit. And I think that, very few people own cars in New York City, by way of example, and even in San Francisco. So think about, people's excitement to jump on a subway or jumping into an Uber or a Lyft or a bus to get to work. And I don't think there are any great answers for this. I don't think cities have the resources to give people a level of confidence that they can go shoulder to shoulder in a subway and go from midtown to downtown, right? I mean, I think that's going to be a big issue, and you can't walk that distance. So they've got some problems. And also, obviously, where people live, right, in the downtown areas. And we look back now on how did this thing spread. And I think that the super spreader was mass transit. I also think that in the older buildings, the co-ops and the apartments, I think actually that, people stayed at home and actually got COVID. I wonder why, right? And so you look at these marketplaces and I really do think they are going to be devastated by what's going on, which goes back to why I said I think that firms will keep a presence in these central business districts, but are going to migrate to some degree and oftentimes a great degree to the suburbs. And what likely will happen is the virus will go away. So thankfully we've got Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca just came out, and there'll be more. And that'll give people confidence. And that's what we really need is we need to have confidence that all of us can jump on a subway and feel safe. The airlines industry has done that. It's interesting. But I don't see, folks in white suits spraying down the subway, the head to toe suits, space suits. I just don't see that happening. So I think the key to long-term confidence in these markets that are going to get hit and be hit very, very hard is probably, this vaccine. Conversely, markets that are going to gain and may gain very quickly, I think it's the suburban markets that are adjacent to these major cities. So I'm thinking Silicon Valley. You guys are headquartered there and very close to it. You know that the volume of business tenants in the market may be slowing, but it's still very good.
And if I could jump in there, in the suburban areas or the rural areas, do you see an increased demand for commercial as well as residential, or do you think the people would move out to those areas, live there, work remotely, and then still continue to go into the metro areas?
Well, I think
that.
Yeah, I think right now there is think about the exodus of New York and think about the exodus out of San Francisco. And, it's driven initially and in big part by COVID, but, we also have riots. We also have homeless. I mean, it's not a great experience in these central business districts right now. So we're going to have a good conversation about exactly, how do you bring these areas back that frankly, a few years ago were rocking. I mean, Midtown Manhattan was one of the safest places that you could go. And now there is no way I'd take my family on those streets, right? So I do think there's a movement out, and I do think the movement out is to the suburbs. I do think there's going to be a migration where possible to the suburbs for many of these companies. And I think that, think about like the suburbs of Seattle, maybe the tech corridor in Boston, the Carolinas, and then close to home here, I think Orange County, as it's related to Los Angeles, offers a much different experience. The buildings are newer. And then I picked on LA as downtown LA, as is certainly is a problem right now. But LA downtown may respond faster because we are a commuter society and we're driving our own cars. And I think that, going back to what I said initially, these cities that rely heavily on mass transit are going to have a heck of a time until we eradicate this virus. So LA is hurting right now because we have a shutdown. But downtown LA, because people drive there, right? Famous LA traffic, might rebound a bit quicker. So I am bullish going forward on the suburban markets for all the reasons that we have talked, and I'm very concerned about the central business districts, and in particular, three cities: New York, San Francisco, Chicago. I think have significant problems, and people just are not going to live there and work there until things are cleaned up.
Yeah, interesting. And there's definitely those large, major metro areas are certainly going to be struggling. So it'd be interesting to see kind of how they adapt. Ted, if I could ask you, what are you seeing already? Companies making some adjustments to bring workforce back to the office? Is it too early to tell, or maybe just give us an insight into what you're hearing from your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of clients, I think every one of our clients are trying to figure out how to get back and do that safely, and get protocols in place for all the reasons that we talked about prior. I mean, I think a lot of the larger companies that we have worked with, they're looking at by Q2 getting people back. I think people are, wanting to hear more about the vaccine, make sure that cases are dropping before they do get back, but and doing that in a safe way and that sort of thing. So I think, again, probably the majority of what we're trying to do is make those places well and safe, healthy buildings by some of the things, touchless technology, doing as much as we can with that, and then certainly workplace strategy in trying to help people get in their spaces with minor modifications. Really, nobody wants to spend a whole lot of money on making changes, because kind of back to what Randy had brought up before, the year of the 1 year extension, they're not getting the dollars from their landlord that they do before to make things, and they don't want the capital expense of coming out of pocket to do too much. So they may do some minor things, in trying to create a more engaging space, but not spending a lot of money overall.
Let me just ask both of you. We've talked about a lot of factors that are going to play into what happens here. Do you think, if you were both to handicap it, would you say, is there one thing you could point to that would be the biggest factor of bringing people back? I mean, trying to figure out if it might be a vaccine, if it's COVID, if it's the major metro areas having to clean up and make people feel safe, not just from COVID, from other things. If you were pointing to one thing, let me just ask each of you, what would the one thing be that you'd keep an eye on as the main driver? And Ted, maybe I'll ask you to go first.
Sure. It's a really good question. I think everybody's got to feel comfortable, and I think that's the biggest thing. Even when we were not on as severe lockdown in Orange County, I think sometimes some of our employees were just cautious because they wanted to make sure it was safe and healthy to come into the office. So I guess I would put it on the vaccine. I think that's going to be a big indicator and a good comfort to a lot of employees to get them going. But it's hard to say just one. But if I had to pick, that'd be probably the first one I would say.
Great.
Yeah.
Randy, how about you?
Yeah, so I agree. That would be my number one. And number one, we can call it a vaccine, but I think the important term is confidence. and how is this market, how are executives, how are employees ultimately going to get a place of confidence. So vaccines, case dropping, et cetera, and all the protocols that companies are initiating, I think all play hand in hand. I would say also the one that I'm going to pick is, and it goes back to my statement about central business districts, and rents likely will reduce and decrease in every market, even suburban markets, but less so. But as the rents in these markets get really beat up in these central business districts, rents are going to drop 25, 30%. And when that happens, and if they then concurrently can also clean up the environment, meaning, the streets and the homeless and all of that, I then think, and I don't think this is, next year or the year following, it's probably 3+ years or more. And we've seen this many times where there was the suburban, move to the suburban world, and then people got tired of that, and then they went back to, the urban world. I do believe there will be a move back to that, but I think it'll be driven by confidence, safety, security, and the age-old, I think I can save money by moving back to downtown. And by the way, downtowns in these major central business districts before COVID were more expensive than the suburbs in a great degree. And that's going to change. And that'll drive people back, but not now because there's no confidence. But if I had to guess, that ultimately will happen.
Great. Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it's a hard thing to measure, but I think confidence or comfort of your workforce is going to be something that all of the companies are going to have to take into account. So certainly some firms that I work with that really want their people back and are going to try to make that happen, whenever they think they'd be able to. Others are probably taking a more hands-off approach and saying we really just have to wait until people are comfortable before we would tell them to come in. Are you seeing any trends of companies that are starting to, evaluate whether to, mandate coming back to the office, or I guess what I would be seeing and ask you to confirm is that there's we're still in a wait and see pattern on that. But you seeing any indications, either of you, that there's companies that are looking to compel versus just waiting and seeing?
You want me to take it, Ted, just real quick?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say the majority of the companies we're working with all are saying we want it to be. We don't want to beg our employees to come back. We want them to really want to come back on their own. So incentivizing as far as making sure the facilities are super clean, making sure that those amenities are well thought out, and if they have to do a little bit more in the amenity category for space, especially if they're looking for new space, amenity rich is super important. But other than that, nothing on the forced side of you have to come back. Yeah, nobody's saying that.
I would just add that I think I try to time frame things. Right before the election, I think that the presidential election, I think that there was a feeling that I got a sense from my clients that there's actually some optimism, and that maybe we're beating this thing, and that in a not too distant future, we can go back to the office. I polled the Irvine Company. For those that are outside of Orange County, Irvine Company is the largest landlord by a long shot here in Orange County. And they track office occupancy by the transponders in your car. So number of cars in the parking structure. And they are seeing an increase of folks coming back to the office. And it's at about, it's gone from about 15%. We're at 25% in Irvine Company buildings, which is a big chunk of the market. So by association, you got to figure generally other buildings and companies are doing the same. 25 to 30%. Conversely, I made that same call to Brookfield, Ted, in downtown LA, and it's like 10%. And so you can see that there was a building of, and that's what I'm saying, there was a building of some momentum. Now, 20 to 25% going to 30% is still a very low occupancy, but you could incrementally see that people were starting to gain some confidence. I think with this latest shutdown, I don't know, it's another gut check, because I don't know what it means again. And I hate to say that, because you all are asking me what I see and what I know. Is this a setback that's very temporary? Or have we moved the bar out into Q1, Q2 again? I just simply do not know. I can tell you, I think that we were on the upswing to a degree, but that's all stopped. And
Yeah,
who knows where this goes? Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think on the West Coast in particular, we're all feeling it right now, because I think up and down the West Coast, we're back to pretty strict, met lockdown type measures. And so it's interesting. I agree with you. When we were preparing for the panel, I think that, even a few weeks ago,
Yes.
I was seeing momentum, and I felt a lot more positivity than I'm feeling today. So I think one theme that's going to continue to be true is how the local governments, state governments, federal government, how they what the type of measures that they require, the type of guidance we get, I think is still, we're largely going to be reacting to that. And I think the big, obviously COVID is the big gorilla in the room, but certainly not the only challenge that a lot of these that we're going to be facing in a lot of the major metro areas in particular. Let me just add, we just got a couple minutes left. Let me just ask both of you really quickly. I'll start with Ted. What are maybe give us one or two things that you're looking for now, or signs, that signals that you think will maybe give some clarity, or make us feel like there is some definition to what we can expect?
Well, I mean, I think, and we talked about it a little bit, but living in California, I think, we got to get out of the purple tier, because I felt the same thing without knowing the numbers, and that was good intel, Randy, from the Irvine company, because I was feeling some positive energy of people getting back, people feeling like, hey, this is getting that. So I think we have to get out of this lockdown situation to really get that confidence back. Because I do think if you look across, and granted, there are some very bleak spots in the economy, but there's a lot of other spots that are pretty bright and that are still going well. I think we all got spoiled with super low unemployment. So when you talk about 10% or 7% unemployment, it's not good. But we were at 4 and 5% for so many years. I think we were spoiled with what that was. But I'm going down a rabbit trail a little bit. But all that to say, I think we get past this lockdown for the West Coast. I think that's going to really help free that up. And of course, then the vaccine piece. I think we've got some good news, good things in the news that'll help create that confidence.
Great, thanks. And you, Randy?
Yeah, I think that tongue in cheek here, but just stop watching the news. That'll help your psyche. I think that keep an eye on this latest shutdown, and let's see how long this lasts. I, again, am more worried than I was even 2 months ago, because I'm not quite sure what this latest shutdown is all about. I mean, I know the cases are spiking, but I don't know how long this is going to last. If it lasts, for 3 to 4 or 5 more months, then all bets are off. Something really bad might happen, meaning that, and by the way, when you think about central business districts and office buildings, you think about amenities. Amenities are retail outlets and restaurants and bars and all of that. And they're gone if this goes on another 3 to 6 months. And that would just be a tragedy. So let's hope that the vaccines are real, that they're safe, and that people feel confident taking them, which will be another concern. Or this virus just magically starts to taper off again somehow, some way. Going into this, Ted, you touched on it, and the good news is, unlike the Great Depression, coming out of that was very difficult because the Great Recession, excuse me, we were in a very deep recession. Going into COVID, we had a robust economy, and we were building upon a very strong foundation. And I kept relying on that in the back of my mind for confidence and really thinking that because we did that, then we're in a good place. That's starting to erode as this thing gets longer. And that's what worries me. So hopefully we pull out of this thing pretty quick, maybe by the end of January. It'll taper down a little bit.
I'm cautiously optimistic that that'll happen, especially with the vaccines. But
Yeah.
say that this latest what's gone on in the last few weeks, I think everybody's a little bit edgy, and unfortunately, it just the continuing theme with 2020 is uncertainty. So let me just take a moment now. If any, we've probably got another minute or two. If anybody wanted to send a question in for either of our panelists. But while we wait for those, if any come in, just want to say thank you very much to Ted and Randy both. You're both obviously different line of different involvement with the real estate industry than we here at Armanino see ourselves. So it's great to get your insights into what you're seeing, what's going on. If I could recap again 2020 and very succinctly, I'd say it's been very uncertain. And I think that's going to continue until probably the COVID situation settles down. Hopefully the vaccine helps with that. But again, would have felt better a few weeks ago saying that I'm really optimistic about 2021 and see a lot of silver lining. Today, I think it's a little bit less clear.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from either of you gentlemen?
That was a good recap.
Yeah. Always an honor, and thank you for taking time to hear us out. And if there are any other questions offline, you all know where to find me. I'd be happy to answer them personally. So, but thank you, David and Marie, for this opportunity. It's great spending time with you, for sure.
Thanks.
Likewise. Thank you both very much. And like Randy was saying, we've got our contact information is in the slide deck if anybody wants to reach out. And Ted, I think I may have cut you off. Any final thoughts for the group?
I just wanted to say thank you. Ditto what Randy said. Thank you very much for including us.
Great. Well, everybody, thank you for attending. Panelists, thank you. I think this was very, very good information, and appreciate everybody joining us. So
thank you, guys.
Marie, I think if you have any final housekeeping items to go through, otherwise I think we'll sign off.
Just want to remind everyone that we'll be sending a link to the recording within 48 hours. And like everyone said, thank you for joining.
All right, thanks a lot.
Bye, guys. Be safe.
Bye.
Thanks.